Good evening from Yerushalayim. We're about 6 days and 22 hours from Rosh Hashanah, from Yom Hadin. And as I speak to you, there are literally incoming rockets from the north, Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, and of course from Gaza. Israel is being attacked on all sides, and it's not a light attack. We're getting dozens to hundreds of missiles every day. And these aren't the small ones. These are not mortars. These are deadly weapons. And that helps a lot in getting perspective for Yom Hadin. So I want to share with you how things look to me as we approach Rosh Hashanah, and what exactly the avoda looks like from this perspective in Yerushalayim to get ready for the Day of Judgment. Let's start by talking about Teshuva generally. Generally, we think of Jewish religiosity as a two-dimensional scale, stretching from secular on one side to religious on the other, with little tick marks indicating levels of composite faith and mitzvah observance. On such a scale, we conceptualize Teshuva as a movement across the scale from less faith in mitzvah observance to more faith in mitzvah observance. That's what Teshuva is defined as. And that's exactly the sort of Teshuva that Maimonides, that Rambam describes. If you open up the Mishnah Torah, its magnum opus, to the laws of Teshuva, chapter 2, the second law there is Ma hiya Teshuva. What is the definition of Teshuva? And there he says, She'azov hachote cheto, the person should stop doing the sin that he's involved in, start doing the mitzvah that he hasn't been doing. V'yasiru mimachshavto, and he should put out of his mind thoughts about doing things that are inappropriate. V'gmor belibo shelo yaseh od, and he should commit in his heart never to do inappropriate behavior again within whatever your reach is. Obviously, you can't commit to things that are beyond your reach, but at this point in your life where you're holding, the Rambam recommends commit to that in your heart. And he says, "V'chein yisnachem al sha'avar." Also, you should regret things that were inappropriate that we did in the past. And then he says, V'ya'id alav yodea talumos, the knower of secrets, that's God, should give testimony, shelo yashuv lezeh chet le'olam, that given your mindset right now, there is no way that you would go back to behaving with that particular inappropriate behavior. And then the final requirement of the Rambam is tzarich lizvados b'sfasav. You have to confess to Hashem, be honest, be transparent with God, and say, yes, I did do that thing. I'm not going to do it anymore, but I did do that thing. That sort of honesty is required with God. So that sort of tshuva, the Rambam's tshuva, involves abandoning sin or embracing mitzvahs. And we've got this very simple scale in front of us, a scale that stretches on one side from a lifestyle that is 100% inconsistent with God's will, to, on the other side of the scale, a lifestyle that it's 100% consistent with God's will. We identify our position on this scale, and then we take determined, if microscopic, steps towards the ideal. Okay, I would call that Teshuva type 1. And in truth, for most of my life, Indeed, I would say until this year, that is the type of tshuva that I focused on. I would like to propose to you tonight that since last Simchas Torah on October the 7th, a spiritual sea change swept across our people that rendered this model of tshuva that I just described simplistic. We know that within days of the war's outbreak, thousands of Israelis living all over the world streamed home. They came from Africa, Asia, Australia, North and South America, nearly every country in Eastern and Western Europe, the Caribbean, and any other paradise that Wanderlust could take someone. Except for the Israeli national carrier, El Al, every airline in the world canceled all flights in and out of Israel, not just because there was military action in Gaza, but because they assumed no one in their right mind would buy a ticket. But returning Israelis filled every, I should say, scheduled and unscheduled El Al flight. They chartered planes and they played international hopscotch in a counterintuitive effort to run into the war zone as quickly as possible. Everyone is coming. No one is saying no, said Jonathan Steiner, 24-year-old who flew back from New York, where he works for a tech company. He came back to join his old Army medical unit. This is different. This is unprecedented, he said, when he was speaking by phone from the border near Lebanon, where his regiment was based. And even if what I just described could be attributed to the Israeli military reserve's loyalty to their former units, that wouldn't explain why more than 20,000 Jews from around the world made Aliyah since the war began, or why many times that number filed papers to begin the immigration process to Israel. And some of those people have never stepped foot upon this land before applying to permanently relocate to a country under siege. Without any prodding, without any guidance from the Israeli government or from diaspora Jewish communal organizations, individual Jews spontaneously identified, procured, and delivered vital equipment for Israel's army between October 2023 and January 2024. That's a short period. They bought, packed, and shipped more than 10,000 pairs of combat boots worth upwards of $850,000. El Al was carrying 100 to 200 duffels a week just filled with boots. By June 2024, individual Jews from around the world provided their Israeli brothers and sisters with an estimated $1 billion in helmets, drones, clothing, night vision goggles, body armor, rifle scopes, knee pads, pocket knives, gun straps, tactical gloves, flashlights, any kind of vital equipment you could imagine. These were beyond the generous donations from the Jewish Federation and many other institutions. It was as grassroots gets. It was just ordinary Jews taking care of their brothers who they may not even know here in Israel. And support didn't just flow in from the diaspora. According to a Tel Aviv University, Ben Gurion University joint study, within the first month of the war, 60% of Israel's population made charitable contributions to the war effort. They provided cash, blood, breast milk, hospital and rescue equipment, anything they could possibly think of that their people on the front needed. Physicians, physical and occupational therapists, social workers, psychologists, professional chefs, drivers, mechanics, and thousands of others with vital skills started working volunteer shifts in addition to their day jobs. That same Tel Aviv University, Ben Gurion University study found 41% of Israelis volunteered in this way. A few months ago, I was listening to Galei Tzahal. It's one of the favorite radio stations among Israel's enlisted soldiers, their army reserves, their wives, their children, their parents, their grandparents, and probably about 90% of all other Israelis. It has news updates every 30 minutes, interviews with influential Israelis. Occasionally they have Israeli music. Above all, the focus of Galei Tzahal is call-ins from the Israeli public. You want to know what's happening in this country? You want to put your finger on the pulse of Israel? Tune into Galei Tzahal. So a few months ago, I'm listening, and a farmer from the south calls in. And he was crying. So the host of the radio show very sensitively asked him, "Is everything okay?" And the man answered, sobbing, "Yes." He said, "I'm crying tears of joy." So the host asked, "Why?" And the farmer explained, 2 weeks ago, I called into your show, and I was crying then too because my fruit trees were filled with ripe fruit, and all my workers were fighting in the reserves. I had no one to help me pick the crop, and I was going to lose everything this season. So the host interrupted, and he said, "Yes, I remember your call." The farmer continued, "At the end of my call, you asked for my phone number, and I gave it to you." The farmer said, "Hundreds of people must have written it down because they called and they came. I'm looking out my window right now. I'm looking at hundreds of Jews. They're walking through my orchards. They're harvesting my fruit for me. They came from the north, from the center, from the south. They're religious. They're non-religious. They're Sephardim. They're Ashkenazim. Some speak Hebrew and some speak other languages." He concluded, "But they're all my Jewish brothers and sisters." Starting the day after October 7th, kindness flowed bidirectionally between Israel's religious and secular populations. For example, a week into the war, many Tel Aviv restaurants chose to become kosher so that they could provide meals for the religious minority in the army. Then, in an unexpected twist, thousands of soldiers who considered themselves secular before the war requested tzitzis. And religious men and women all over the country went to work dyeing 60,000 shirts army green and tying onto them 60,000 sets of white strings and delivering to the fronts. 60,000 pairs of tzitzis. And it continues today. Were we just witnessing an outpouring of appreciation and support for the army? That wouldn't explain why only a few weeks into the war, religious Jews in Modi'in, Rehavia, Beitar, and other Orthodox neighborhoods started standing at intersections in adjacent secular neighborhoods, handing out Shabbos candles, Kiddush wine, and home-baked challahs. Or even more curiously, that would explain why their secular neighbors stopped their cars to accept the packages and express mutual affection. By March 2024, Jews in this country were giving other Jews over 1,000 of these Shabbos packages a week. And apart from the paper bags that were donated by a couple of large organizations, all the costs were borne by these same non-professionals who shopped for the candles and the wine and baked the challahs. This was spontaneous. It is grassroots. When asked, Why, why are people from such different demographics all so excited about this giving and receiving initiative? A Haredi woman who I know from Moshav Matityahu told me, this is called unity. It's called brotherhood and connection. Think about this. The day after October the 7th, Kesher Yehudi, it's an Israeli nonprofit, was dwarfed by demand for their Harusa program. That program introduces secular and religious Israelis to each other so they can talk to each other, learn with each other, connect. Thousands of requests poured in from both cohorts, from the religious and the secular, not primarily for opportunities to learn or teach Torah, but to grow a long-term friendship with someone from a different background. A Kesher Yehudi administrator told me that after October the 7th, the weekly requests from secular and religious Israelis to meet their counterparts soared by 350%. And to date, it hasn't slowed. As of today, Kesher Yehudi has provided introductions for more than 25,000 of these partners. They're creating these very unique friendships between the secular and the religious. Mostly secular families of the hostages asked Kesher Yehudi to run a Shabbaton for them, where they could mix with religious people. And then both cohorts requested another Shabbaton after that. And then the Nova Music Festival survivors asked for a similar mixed Shabbaton, religious and non-religious. And then they asked for a second one. A religious participant told me, quote, "We understand that the situation that existed before October the 7th cannot continue. We need to learn and live together. Each of us needs to know and understand each other." A secular participant in one of the Shabbatons said, "What moves me the most is seeing the love of our people, how united and loving we all are. And nothing matters but only one thing, that we're all Jews." Moshe Leon, Jerusalem's mayor, wrote about the Kesher Yehudi phenomenon. He wrote, quote, "This revolution is profound and stems from our very roots. It has begun a process of inner healing for our nation." A few weeks after October the 7th, I was driving down the street. It was the first time that I saw this poster. It read, "There is no left and there is no right." And those posters went up in cities all across Israel. I have to say, it was one of the most refreshing ad campaigns I've ever seen. The people hung hand-painted signs from the balconies that read, "Yachad Ninatzeach," together we will triumph. And then the government adopted that as the slogan of the war. On Sunday, I began to see a new poster taped to traffic signal poles. That new poster says, it has a picture of someone who was killed in this war, soldiers who were killed. And it says, "For his sake, achdus," for his sake, unity. Maybe this is just an expression of national solidarity. Maybe it's the intuitive reaction to close ranks when we're under attack. But I have to confess to you that many of us who are living and breathing this transformation feel that there may be something more profound afoot. It hit me a few months ago. I went to the Nova site. I went there with some of my Talmidim, my students. And our intention was to provide help, maybe some comfort to the mourners who gather at the Nova site daily. There were parents, children, brothers, sisters, tending to these these makeshift memorials for their slaughtered relatives. These are not government set up memorials. These are the families themselves who come there and drive a stake into the ground and put a picture of their relative on it. So when I went there with my students, an apparently secular woman took a sack of white stones out of her car, and she started arranging them around a stake that was planted in the ground with a picture of her deceased son. So we meandered over to her. We asked if we could help. She didn't look at us, but she conveyed appreciation. We got down on our hands and knees. We started helping. When we were done placing the stones, we stood in silence for a few minutes. And then one of my talmidim, one of my students, whispered to the mother, "Could we say Kaddish for your son?" She, staring at the ground, whispered back, "I lost my faith a long time ago. I lost my faith a long time ago." We waited a few minutes, and then another one of my talmidim said, "How about Kel Malei Rachamim?" She was crying, but she nodded to indicate that would be okay. When we finished reciting Kel Malei Rachamim, we were all crying. She remained standing there with us for a long time. Then another one of my students whispered to her again, "Would you like us to say Kaddish?" It was the first time. She looked up at us. She scanned our faces. And then she said, "Yes, please say Kaddish." It's possible that when she scanned our faces, she saw something familiar. Okay, I'm going to try to explain. Teshuva might be a broader, a deeper process than just movement from less to more mitzvah observance. In cryptic comment on a passage in the Gemara of Avodah Zarah 19a, Rashi defines tshuva as, quote, lahakir boro, to recognize one's creator. Rashi's tshuva seems to be different. It's lahakir boro, to recognize your creator. The Rambam's tshuva was a zivas hachet. It was walking away from sin. But Rashi says tshuva is to recognize your creator. What does that mean? So Avram Avinu's tshuva process illuminates what that word recognize, lahakir, might mean here. According to the tradition, at age 3, Avraham knew there was a God. He knew there was a God. But by age 40, he progressed from knowledge to recognition. That's according to Maimonides, Rambam, in Hilchos Avodah Zarah, chapter 1, halacha 3. The Hebrew word for recognizing God, hakara, implies much more than just knowing, much more than just yediyah that there is a God. One who only knows that God exists could still view him as foreign, unrelatable. There's a force out there. Recognition implies familiarity. I recognize you. By age 40, Avraham saw something familiar in God, his own divine image. The Medrash, Bamidbar Rabbah 14:2 reads, from himself, Avraham recognized the Holy One. From within himself. Every member of the Jewish nation had such an experience at the Yam Suf, at the splitting of the Reed Sea. There, every individual sang the verse from Exodus 15:2, Zekeli v'anvehu, this is my God. V'anvehu. Rashi in the Gemara, Shabbos 133b, translates anvehu literally as ani, vehu, me and him. This is my God, me and him. At Yam Suf, every individual saw his or her own potential when they looked at the Holy One. And they wanted to bring forth that potential that they were looking at in God. They wanted to bring it forth in themselves. Eventually, the recognizing God type of tshuva, Rashi's tshuva, could lead to the mitzvah observance type of tshuva, the Rambam's tshuva. How? People who want to become similar to God may notice the thread connects all of his behavior. There's a pasuk, there's a verse in Tehillim in Psalms 147:19 that reads, Magid devarav liYaakov, hukavu mishpatav liYisrael. He tells his commandments to Jacob, his statutes and decrees to Israel. So our tradition, you find this in Shmos Rabbah 39, asks, why the mitzvahs that God commanded to us are called his mitzvahs? They should be called our mitzvahs. Why does the verse in Tehillim, why did King David say they're God's mitzvahs? Why did King David say they're our mitzvahs? After all, God commanded us. And the Midrash there says, Mashahu oseh, what he, God, does, hu omer li Yisrael lasot, v'lishmor. He also tells the Jews to do. It doesn't say that he also keeps the commandments. It says what he does, who he is, how he behaves, his essence. That is how he tells us to behave. In some unfathomable way, God keeps all the mitzvahs. And for us to bring forth our divine potential, we have to keep the mitzvahs too. Now, of course, we understand God rested on the seventh day, so he keeps the Shabbos, and God does kindness, so we can do kindness also. But what does that mean that God puts on tefillin? Well, there was a medrash about Moses seeing God's tefillin, the back of the knot in God's tefillin, and by every single mitzvah, there is some spiritual reality that in the non-physical realm, God is fulfilling. It's only when that true mitzvah, the spiritual mitzvah that God's fulfilling, sort of unravels down into our world, it takes on physical form. And then we perform that fantastically deep and spiritual routine using physicality. Avram Avinu recognized God. He understood that the mitzvahs are divine behavior. And that's why he took the mitzvahs upon himself as well. That's the Gemara in Yuma 28b. Knowing that God exists, just knowing, but not recognizing him, leads in the exact opposite direction of Avram Avinu. Healthy people not only intuitively sense their uniqueness, but they feel a need to express that uniqueness. I first heard this from Shlomo Volba. He said, Hayodea Ribono, someone who knows his master. Yodea ki koach Eloki nimtza michutzalo. He knows that there's a divine force outside of him. The Sholed Alav. And he knows that that divine force, that Almighty God, rules over him. The etzem hayedia hazos. Just this knowledge that there's some mighty power out there that could quash me, that could limit me, that could prevent me from being me. Mamrida oto neged ribono. That could inspire somebody to rebel against God. No human being wants to be controlled by someone who could limit their heart, that could in some way limit their freedom. The human drive to self-actualize, to become ourselves, can be so strong. It could be as strong as the desire for life itself. If someone threatens another's freedom to self-actualize, most people will fight back. Rashi says this, that both Nimrod, Genesis 10:9, and the citizens of Sodom, Genesis 13:13, they both knew that God existed. They were Yodea. They knew that God existed. They just never made it to the next step of recognizing, oh, that's me. They felt no commonality with God. They knew that there was some power outside of them. And they were afraid that he would make them not be themselves. And therefore, Nimrod and the people of Sodom rebelled. And so did many other Jews throughout history. Okay, just stay with me for a few more minutes. This gets deeper. Perhaps Jewish unity and Teshuva are interlinked. The more thoroughly one recognizes the Creator, the more obvious it becomes that God has multiple manifestations. This is Gemara in Sanhedrin 37a. When a person stamps several coins with one seal, when a person does that, all the coins come out identical. But the Supreme King of Kings, the Almighty Master of the universe, stamped all people with the seal of Adam, with the seal of the first man, Adam. And not one of them is similar to another. The 18th century Kabbalist, Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, explains this concept in Kabbalistic terms. Now, we don't have to understand the depth of what he's saying. I don't even understand the most superficial words that he's saying. But you can't help but be clobbered by this impression that God is relating to each one of us with a unique identity. The Ramchal writes, God condensed his divinity, if you can understand such a thing. He condensed his divinity into a form that human beings could access, could relate to. And that condensation is called the Spheros. In the Ramchal's Sefer, in his book, Pischei Chochma V'das, in section 105, Ramchal, Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, reveals that this condensed form of divinity descended and morphed into the soul of Adam Harishon. Godliness, divinity, became the soul of the first man, the first human being. That spiritual entity descended and morphed into three souls: Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Those three descended and morphed into 12, the 12 tribes, which descended and morphed into 70, the Jews who arrived in Egypt, which descended and morphed into 600,000. And those are the 600,000 roots of Klal Yisrael, of the Jewish nation. In other words, in some unfathomable way, God has 600,000 facets. It's like he shines his infinitely bright white light into a prism, and it splits into 600,000 separate beams. And each of those beams, each of those facets corresponds to a Jewish soul who contains that aspect of divinity, at least in potential. In another one of the Ramchal's books, Adir B'Marom, on page 38, and also in another essay he wrote called Derech Eitz Chaim, he explains that each of these 600,000 aspects of God provides its own unique path in Torah. So there are 600,000 unique paths in the Torah, one for every unique soul. Okay, so I think you're starting to see what I'm looking at. The more the individual brings forth his unique Tselem Elokim, his divine image, the more he recognizes his own identity in the Holy One, the more he realizes, oh, you won't limit me. You are what I could become. At some stage in the Teshuva process, one may recognize in God not only his own unique potential, but others' very unique potentials as well. I think this might be what we've been witnessing since October the 7th. And of course, when you start seeing that that person is also a piece of divinity on this planet, and that person is also a perfect representation of that facet of God, and that person represents that aspect of God. So that's much more than just tolerating other Jews. That involves acknowledging that all of our differences may stem from a common divine source. What I'm describing is a state of mutual responsibility, appreciation, affection, and even connection. This kind of tshuva that I'm describing, it's a place where diversity and unity become inextricably bound together in this divine ideal. I want to open this up to you to discuss, but I'll just conclude by saying that that morning at the site of the Nova Festival, my students and I saw, we recognized something familiar in a mourning mother. And I suspect that she recognized something familiar in us. Differences like religious and secular, left and right, Israeli Jew, diaspora Jew, all those seem insignificant when you compare them to the divine image that's in all of us. To me, this feels like the tshuva that many of us are experiencing post October the 7th. It's certainly the sort of tshuva that leads to achdus, to national unity, to all Jews being back on the same page again. I suspect that's one of the things that God wanted from us after October the 7th. And that is certainly the prerequisite for both personal and national salvation. That's what I want to share with you. I want to hear from you. Thank God there's hundreds of us here tonight. Let's share, let's talk. We've got less than a week before Yom Hadin, before Rosh Hashanah. Are you feeling it? Are you feeling what I'm feeling?
Here, no.
So,
you could raise your hand if you have a question. You could just click the little hand icon, raise your hand. Ellie?
Shalom Aleichem, Rebbe.
Aleichem Shalom, Eli. So good to hear from you.
Thank you. On a very technical point, just to confirm that I'm looking at the situation correctly, from October 7th and on, all these stories and all these actions, people have been phrasing it as the amazing chesed, the amazing chesed. And when I look at it, I say, for me to assist in my way is to say good morning to my wife an extra time, to call her extra time during the day, and not to take away to do anything for Israel that's going to be pageya in that relationship. What's happening with Eretz Yisrael is an obligation of Kol Yisrael or Evim Zelazeh, that the person is mechuyev to do als menschlichkeit and other aspects. But als the midah of chesed, would it be correct in saying that the core midah is still ben ish leishtai, and only if that's completely full can you then continue to do chesed with others?
That's a fantastic question, Eli. And of course, the principle that you're saying is true, that we have these rings of moral responsibility. And we have to make sure that we've taken care of those to whom we have the most responsibility first. And then we can slowly extend beyond that. What I've seen, which is so interesting, in now we're almost going on a year since the war began, is husbands and wives taking care of each other spiritually by taking care of others physically. I've often advised married couples that it's not a problem when you're first married if you're impoverished, if you don't have a lot of money. That creates an external challenge, something outside of the two of you that you both have to work together to overcome. Or if the two of you have some other challenge that the two of you are fighting together, it's that process of unifying to accomplish something that's meaningful and important that can create a closeness in a couple that could otherwise never be created. And I can tell you from personal stories that I've heard in recent months about the greatness that has been developed in marriages as couples work together to take care of their brothers and sisters. It's been something really, really beautiful. Now, of course, Ellie, you're 100% correct. If taking care of others gets in the way of the marriage, then of course, the marriage has to be cared for first. But many, many times, taking care of others is what actually powers a marriage spiritually. I love the question.
So Keilu including the spouse and saying there's this challenge that's out there. How can we do something together to help? And they'll bring them together to do such a thing.
Exactly. I mean, I'll give you just a couple of gross mashalim. One would be this. Let's say that your wife and you are on a date and you're walking down the street and a man has a heart attack in front of you. So you wouldn't say, listen, we can't call 911 because we're on a date right now and our marriage takes priority. Adarabba. The two of you would dive in, right? You call 911, I'm going to start CPR, and the two of you would be working together to save this man's life, and you would feel like such a team.
Right.
Or another example, there have been times in recent months when Jewish lives absolutely depended on people helping out. And if those people wouldn't have helped out, Jews would have died. We needed much more than just the army here. We needed a lot of support. And if you knew that a Jew, even in a different country, even in Israel, would die, then you and your wife would say, okay, let's get on it. What can we do? Let's help. Great question.
Thank you. Yom Tov.
You're welcome, Eli. Good job. More, please
Okay,
ask.
Shira?
Yeah, hi. So I live in Eretz Yisrael, and one of the things that we're seeing is that it started to divide again between, the hostages and the political things. And I'm wondering how do we as a society in a grassroots way make it, yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this. How do we make it so that we keep the love and the unity, that even though we have really deep divisions, and unfortunately these divisions are going to come back up, the judicial reform is going to come back up, and all of these other things, they're going to come right back up. And to be able to keep our love and recognition of each other as who we are as we go through these very, very difficult conversations, and many of them really are life and death conversations. Certainly the hostages is a life and death conversation. What are we prioritizing versus Philadelphia corridor, the political discussions. There are lots of things that the Haredi draft. There are so many things that are coming up front and center and kind of need to be resolved. And we need, how do we individually and as a society do that? How do we do that?
It's such a good question, Shira, and I saw what you saw. But I saw something else happening simultaneously which contradicted that. So I wasn't sure what was happening, and I think I may have figured it out. I'll throw it out there. Spend the next week or two looking and see if you don't see what I'm saying is true. In the wake of October the 7th, we saw a sea change. I was recently down at Nir Oz, one of the kibbutzim that was slaughtered on October the 7th. And my friend from Nir Oz was taking me around, and we walked into the dining hall. And you don't actually have to open the door to walk into the dining hall because the Nukhba terrorists who came to Nir Oz used M16s and just blew the entire door away. So you can just step through the door frame. And we stepped through the door frame, and before we actually entered into the area where people sit and eat, to my left, there was like a bulletin board. Now, nothing at Nir Oz has been touched since October the 7th. They haven't had a chance to clean up anything. It's all looks exactly like it looked on October the 7th. And hanging on the bulletin board to my left was a giant poster that said, "Tonight, October the 7th, we are going to protest against the government." No one made it to that protest. And on October the 8th, no one wanted to go to any more protests. And from October the 8th forward, this people of Israel, have been on an incredible ascent. And then I started to see what you start to see. I started to see, no, before we wanted to take Bibi Netanyahu down for this reason, because of judicial reform. But now we need to take him down because of his management of Gaza. But now Gaza's over, so we need to take him down because of the management of Hezbollah. What I realized was that I was watching this apparent machlokus, this huge division in Klal Yisrael, through the eyes of the media and the politicians. The media love the fight. Peace is boring. I tried to make it exciting for you tonight. I think peace is the most exciting thing. But the media loves the fight. And they love to make it seem like we're coming apart at the seams. And the media can very easily influence people who actually want it to all come apart at the seams? The politicians. This guy wants Bibi out because he wants his job, and this guy wants Bibi out because he wants his job, and everybody in the political world, I shouldn't say everybody, many people in the political world would love to kill other people, other Jews, because they're getting in their way. But the politicians and the media represent a very, very small part of Klal Yisrael. I'll illustrate this for you. When I heard that Hirsch was killed, so I'm a Jew. He's a neighbor, and I decided I was going to go to the Shiva. So I looked up the address and I went to the Shiva. Now, when I went to the Shiva, I guess I wasn't surprised, but it did catch my attention that this Shiva wasn't happening in Hirsch's parents' house. The government had set up a giant tent and a huge area on a major intersection, so there'd be enough room for all the people who wanted to come and be Menachem Avil for Hirsch, who wanted to come and comfort his parents. And indeed, when I arrived, there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people standing in line. So I got in line. I waited in line for maybe a half an hour. I didn't even get into the tent, this giant tent. I was on the street in line for half an hour. I never got into the tent because it was time for mincha. And the line disappeared because we all went to daven mincha with Hirsch's parents. And it was an enormous minyan, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. When I was looking around the minyan, I saw something amazing. There were black hats in the minyan. There were knitted kippahs in the minyan. There were people with felt kippahs in the minyan of all sorts of different colors. There were "We Want Mashiach Now" people in the minyan. There were people who put on nylon kippot to daven with the minyan. There was every conceivable Jew in the minyan. And there was men there, and there was women there, and they were dressed every conceivable way. And then, when Mincha Ma'ariv was over, I went back and I got in line. And I waited. And after a while, I got into the tent. And the people who were standing in that line, none of them looked alike. It was all of Klal Yisrael. And I have to tell you, I've never been to a shiva like this ever in my life. When I got up to the front of the line, there was a wonderful, very sensitive woman there who asked me and my Talmud, I was with one of my Talmidim, she said, "How many of you are in your party?" As if she was seating people at a restaurant. I said, "There's 2 of us." And she said, "Okay, just a minute." There were some people that were speaking to Hirsch's parents. It was, I don't know, maybe a group of 4 or 5 people who were sitting and talking to them. Hirsch's parents obviously knew them because Hirsch's parents were leaned over and they were speaking to them with such enthusiasm and such intimacy and focus. And so these obviously were family friends. And after a few minutes, they got up and they moved on. And this wonderful woman said, "Okay, you can come and sit." And my Talmud and I came in and we sat down. And Hirsch's mother said, "Who are you? What's your name?" And Hirsch's father said, "Thank you so much for coming." And within a minute, they were leaning over and they were involved in this intimate, personal conversation, staring into our eyes. And every single one of the thousands of people of all different colors who came there all sat with Hirsch's parents, who, what camp do they fit into? And we all comforted each other. I think that if you listen to the media, if you watch the news, if you look at the vicious posters that political parties hang, then yeah, it looks like, yeah, the whole thing started up again. But if you go out to the people, if you go to talk to the farmer in the South, if you go to the Shiva, if you're in the streets, if you actually put your fingers on the pulse of Klal Yisrael, we still have the unity.
But what about I mean, you're saying
Go ahead,
that,
I'm
what
sorry.
about all the protests?
Oh, so there are definitely people who are being encouraged by political groups to go out to those protests. But if you count the number of people in those protests versus the number of people in this country, those protests are tiny. Even if they can gather a few tens of thousands of people, which they have at times. But that is a political group that was organized specifically because we want to take this politician down, or we want to take that politician down. And these groups are very, very well funded. You also may have noticed that all of the PR for those groups, it all looks the same. The posters all have the exact same look. And it's funny because the judicial reform posters and PR looked exactly like the PR for the Bibi is not doing a good job managing the hostage crisis posters. It's all paid for. It's all a movement by a small group of people who are trying to split the Jewish nation apart. But it's not the Jewish nation. It's not what's happening in people's homes or in the streets. That's not what's actually happening here. And when you go and you spend time with them, you realize we love each other.
Hey, hope you're enjoying this live presentation that Rabbi Kelemen gave, and wanted to invite you to join him more frequently. He does live Q&A sessions every month with his inner circle, currently offering a free 30-day trial. If you wanted to stay a member, we're offering a limited time 25% off coupon that never expires. Usually the coupon is valid for the first 12 months and then it goes to full price. So that's a current promotion we're doing right now. So you can check out more about the program by clicking the link below, or you can actually get there from the homepage, LawrenceKelemen.com, and you just go to the join button. And when you click that, it'll take you to a page that will show you all about Rabbi Kelemen's program, including a message from him that tells you a lot about the program and just a whole bunch of information. And yeah, it's 30-day free trial, and there's a guarantee. So even if you forgot to cancel and you were charged, we'll refund you. You just email us back on any of the emails, and we'll give you your money back, no problem. And I invite you to take advantage of the 25% off for life coupon. You can cancel anytime, but as long as you remember, you'll be grandfathered in at that price.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, I would love to see you guys every month. I only do these webinars now and then, but I am so appreciative that you all got on with me tonight, and it means a lot, especially when tackling this sort of a topic. I do feel like there's a unity. I think if you could see every single person's picture of the hundreds of people who are on tonight, I think you would see everybody looks different. They all want to know how to make Rosh Hashanah work. Let's take another question.
Labe?
Okay, my wife Sarah is going to speak.
Mm-hmm. First of all, thank you to the Rav for, as usual, profound, thought-provoking, mind-transforming exposition.
Can I turn on your camera?
Do you need my camera? I don't need my camera. Okay, but it's me, Sarah. So,
hi, Sarah. Hi, Labe. So good to have you on.
So, what the Rav said, I can get into it in terms of, I don't use the word secular Jew. Rav Machlis does not allow me to use the word secular. He said all Jews are holy, so I never use that word. But I'll say non-Shomer Shabbos Jews. So I can totally focus on seeing, the Tzelem Elokim and Jews that are non-Shomer Shabbos. But I'm having a much harder time in this last period since, as Shira said, the tremendous unity seems to be cracking, although I understand what the Rav is saying about, the political groups. I have a much harder time looking at the religious people because, as religious people, of course, I mean Haredi people, because I have greater expectations that they know what the Rav knows, what the Torah says. And there was something in Hamodia a couple days ago, apparently, that written by somebody in United Torah Judaism, very low on the list, 107 on their Knesset list, but so way down, not one of the leaders, but they printed it, and it's just like blaming the people in the kibbutzim for that were slaughtered on it because their
Did I
own
lose
fault. What? What's what I'm saying?
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah, good.
So this,
No,
this,
please keep talking.
And they printed it, and it was long. It was there. I don't know if it has ever been withdrawn. This was maybe 2 days ago. Yeah, Yair Lapid was able to read it and get everybody very upset because they're blaming the victims of October 7th. Like, I don't understand, and and I can't relate to religious people who are not grasping the ideal of Achdus at this point.
Excellent. Fantastic question, Sarah. Okay, Sarah, let me ask you something. Officially, I am Haredi. How do you feel about me? Did I lose you? I think you would say,
Now you
Yeah,
well,
no, I know.
go ahead.
I have nothing but love and gratitude for Rav Kelemen.
Let me ask something else. Are there any other Haredi Jews that you feel love towards?
Of course. I mean, so many. So many.
So many. There's so many Haredi Jews that you feel love towards.
Yes.
Who do you not feel love towards? Towards a political journal and a politician who used that political journal, both of them, to create a huge fight. That's exactly what I was saying. You named a political journal. It's a mouthpiece of a political party. And you named a politician. And they are tearing or trying to tear. They're not succeeding, but they're trying to tear Klal Yisrael apart. But how do you feel about the Haredim that you know? You like them. More than that, you love them. That's exactly what I'm saying, is that, yeah, all the Haredim are terrible, except the ones that I know personally. And all the Kippah Sruga are terrible, except the ones that I know personally. And it turns out all of those people who are terrible. It's media. It's politics. It has nothing to do with Klal Yisrael. The ones who you actually know you like. So,
But are the
now, of
leaders?
course, you'll have an individual here and there who will make mistakes. I make mistakes. You make mistakes. We all do things that are not terrific sometimes. The problem is when the media catches a photo of that guy and says, and these are the Haredim, right? Or these are the Kippah Sruga, these are the settlers, or these are the secular, and then gets everybody all worked up thinking, yeah, they're all bad people. But of course, the ones that I know are nice. It's almost like anti-Semitism. You ask an anti-Semite, how do you feel about the Jews? They're evil. Well, wait a minute. What about Schwartz? No, Schwartz is different. I like Schwartz. That's exactly what you're facing here.
But is the leadership coming out with messages of Achdus?
You mean the political leadership?
No, the religious leadership, the Gedolim. I mean, I don't
like this. I don't know who the Gedolim are. When you talk about Gedolim, it sounds like people who appear on cards that they hand out in Cheder. I can talk about giant Torah personalities, huge Torah personalities, who are only saying one thing and have only been saying one thing since October the 7th. I don't know if any of you get a chance to listen to Rav Asher Weiss.
Yes.
Who is Rav Asher Weiss? He's a Haredi. Is he a Chassid? Is he lectures at all the Kippah Sruga yeshivas and like, who exactly is he? So it turns out, like, is he Gadol? He doesn't appear on any of the cards. He's not printed in that political journal. So it depends what you mean by the Gedolim. The Gedolim are people who are named by that journal. But if you're talking about great Torah personalities, there are huge Torah personalities who've been saying one thing since the beginning, which is that God wanted us to be unified. We almost destroyed ourselves with the fighting that was taking place up until October the 6th. And in some weird way, God saved us, because now we don't want to kill each other anymore. Everyone else wants to kill us, and we are unifying and coming back together again. So, Saran Leib, I think you're 100% right. You really illustrated it perfectly, that if you pay attention to political banter, it looks terrible, but that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to tear us apart, but they're a tiny and destructive minority. And Klal Yisrael, Klal Yisrael is beautiful. When we're judged on Rosh Hashanah, this is what Hashem's going to see. He's going to say, Klal Yisrael is beautiful. I'm going to judge Klal Yisrael l'chavschus, because they are beautiful. If there's individuals who are trying to tear us apart, fine. But they're Klal Yisrael, the people, they are beautiful. Fantastic question. I'm a little bit over, but should I take one more? I'll take one more question maybe tonight. Is there another?
If no one else is, can I?
Oh, of course.
Thank you, Rav Kelemen, for everything. I agree, just on an instinctive level with that. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
There is something very profound going on in this last year, and I pray that there are real spiritual shifts going on. But where does the rest of the world, the non-Jewish world, fit into this movement, this spiritual movement, in your view? Because it seems it's the worst anti-Semitism that I have ever witnessed. I'm 60 years old, and I live in Yerushalayim now. But it's the worst anti-Semitism I've seen ever. Since we went into Gaza. And what's more painful for me is the left wing, of whom some of my family are very left-wing Jews, who are really violent. As much as I am passionate for Israel, they are really passionate against Israel.
Yes. You're asking a heavy question, Jacqueline, a very heavy question. Reb Yerucham Levovitz, this is Reb Volba's Rebbe, was walking in Europe shortly before World War II. And a little boy ran up to him with a stick and started beating him. And later, a student who was with Rabbi Yerucham asked him, why did he attack you? And Rabbi Yerucham said, Tuma hates Kedusha. Spiritual impurity hates spiritual purity. As the Jews ascended spiritually, beginning on October the 8th, and as we have continued to ascend by becoming more unified and more loving, more concerned about each other, it's brought out all the beasts in the forest. Shechita, kosher slaughtering, has been banned in many countries in Europe. Canada is currently considering banning it. The United States has already said that if Canada banned it, they would consider it also. The last time that there were major government movements to ban Shechita was 1931, and the person who was behind it was Adolf Hitler. What did Hitler care about Shechita? He didn't, but he was brilliant. And he understood that if he could show the world that Shechita is inhumane, kosher slaughtering is inhumane, then people would conclude, well, the Torah must be inhumane. And who are the people who carry the Torah? The Jews. They must be inhumane. And then he could kill the Jews. We're seeing something very, very similar happening in the world today. You're not imagining it. There is more anti-Semitism out there in countries of the world than there has ever been before, at least since World War II. We've never seen anything like this since World War II. And it's not slowing down. It's almost as if because we're fighting Hezbollah, that suddenly Hezbollah, which was a terrorist group according to the United States of America, now because the Jews are fighting back against Hezbollah, Hezbollah has to be preserved. We need a ceasefire. Don't destroy them. Now, these are people who killed American soldiers. But like the world has gone crazy. Anyone who's an enemy of the Jews, keep them around, keep them alive. Because the Jews have to be destroyed. Hit Rabbi Yerucham Levavitch with a stick. And of course, there are Jews who are also carried along by the media, the masses in other countries who are saying that they're not saying the Jews are terrible, although some of them are, but many of them are saying the Israelis are terrible. It's the Israelis who need to be stopped. And those Jews get involved in it also. It happens. But I view all of this as a reaction, a spiritual reaction to something spectacular that's happening. The Jews have never been in a better place since World War II. We've never been this unified since World War II. And I pray and I expect that we will hang on to this. We're not going to let it go again soon. Okay, it's late here in Yerushalayim, so I'm going to let you go. But I want to wish you a ksiva, a chasima tova. You should be inscribed and you should be sealed for a beautiful, good new year, a year full of bracha, full of peace, full of health, full of parnasa, full of friendship, full of Torah. May Klal Yisrael be inscribed and sealed for friendship in this coming year. And may we prove ourselves worthy of that gzera. Good night from Yerushalayim. Please join me on Inner Circle. Go to LawrenceKelemen.com. I would love to meet with you every month. I also have shirim that I send out every week, every couple of weeks. So I would love to have all of you on board. Good night from Yerushalayim. Take care.
Here's a short video of Rabbi Kelemen talking about his Inner Circle program.
Welcome to the Inner Circle. You've come to a very special place. A place where you will discover your strengths and bring forth your uniqueness. This is not just another entertaining and educational podcast. Inner Circle is a practicum. It's a workshop for fulfilling your potential. It's a liminal space that hovers between who you've been and who you want to become. And I hope that you'll visit me here at the Inner Circle several times a week. Okay, so you'll ask, several times a week? I thought there were only 2 presentations a month. So I want to clarify for you what is waiting for you here at the Inner Circle. There's a lot of adventures and a lot of different types of adventures. Okay. First, there are 28 hours of practical guidance in bringing forth your potential as a parent or a teacher. The Torah provides a comprehensive system for bringing forth every child's unique potential. And that system, passed parent to child and teacher to student for the last 3,000 years, provides a simple set of sometimes counterintuitive algorithms enabling any parent or any teacher to successfully face any parenting or educational challenge. Let your child become all he or she can be. Let your student become all he or she can be. By you becoming the parent and or teacher that you could be. I'll speak to you about that for 28 hours during that Chinuch series. Okay, next. There are 48 hours on how to trigger the miracle of personal growth. Many people never stop to consider, why do I find it so hard or impossible to change? Okay. These 48 hours are a practicum in changing. It's not focused on developing any particular trait. Rather, it provides you with the practical instructions for how to go about changing any deeply ingrained habit of thought, speech, or behavior. And like everything else that I'm going to be providing to you at Inner Circle, everything here flows directly from Torah sources. This is the 3,000-year-old Jewish formula for personal growth. And personally, I think that these 48 hours are a great introduction to all the other courses that you'll take on this site. Because this site is all about changing, about growth. Okay, there's a third adventure waiting for you here. This is one of my favorites. Once a month, I meet here with Inner Circle members live in a live video chat. Okay, there's no restrictions on what you can ask. It's a free-for-all. It's an open forum. It's you and me together, live, talking, here in my study. And you can come and sit with me. And if you don't feel comfortable asking a particular question with your face and name displayed, so I've also made an arrangement that you can send questions in to these live sessions anonymously, and I'll read those questions anonymously and then address them for you. Just send them in advance. This happens every month, and it'll continue to happen every month for your entire stay here in the Inner Circle with me. There are, by the way, also more than 70 hours of past question and answer sessions available to you here in the Inner Circle archive, all unedited and on a range of topics as broad as you could possibly imagine. Okay, next, in addition to these, now what is it, we're up to about 150 or so hours of material, there is the flagship program of the Inner Circle, which are multiple growth-oriented series. Each one of these series consists of anywhere between 5 and 100 hours of video. And I add new material to this library every week. So you'll have spiritual adventures to look forward to for a lifetime. Each of these series has a different focus, and each offers profoundly deep Torah. But also, and this is the key, these series make this profoundly deep Torah practical. So you won't just learn Torah, you'll actually have the opportunity to become it. That's what's so unique about this base midrash. Just as each lecture within a series prepares you intellectually, spiritually, and behaviorally for the next lecture, so too, each of these series will prepare you intellectually, spiritually, and behaviorally for the next series. And I've organized all these series into the specific order that makes the material the easiest to master. You won't have to worry which series to listen to next. You're at the beginning of a process that will last a lifetime. The best part of these seminars is they aren't just edutainment. As I said, this isn't another podcast. After clarifying the concept at hand, I will then provide you with a practical exercise. Okay, the exercises I'm going to give you are challenging, but with only a couple of weeks of practice, you'll master them, and then you'll be ready for the next exercise. Okay, by the way, that's why I give you the material slowly. You'll need time between new concepts. And I'll give you these exercises in a spread out fashion so that you'll have the opportunity to internalize them, to make them part of you, to allow these concepts and exercises to fuel your individuality and uniqueness. And the 2-week spacing not only provides you just enough time to do the new exercise, but it'll also give you time to listen to each one of the presentations a few times. And I intended that. You will hear me quote often the great 18th century Kabbalist, Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. In his magnum opus, The Path of the Just, he wrote that the real benefit of the Torah is bequeathed not through a single exposure, but through the deep changes that are stimulated by exposure over and over again. That's part of the reason I started this program. One of the negative side effects of ordinary podcasts is burnout. People start devouring the material with enthusiasm, but they can't possibly grow as fast as they can listen to the podcast. So after a while, it becomes obvious that the podcast is just an intellectual tease, but it isn't structured to help you actually grow and change. And then when people see that they're learning a lot of ideas but not changing, it becomes depressing. Then the inspiration fades. It backfires. And with it, so does any hope of personal growth. Okay, one of the secrets of the inner circle is that real inspiration doesn't come from entertainment, but from personal change. The more I change, the more inspired I become, the more that I become inspired and change. Here in the inner circle, our whole focus is growth. And you're only exposed to the next idea after you've been given time to become it. And you'll find when you become an idea, then you become really inspired. And then you don't burn out. The inspiration from changing will be as constant as your growth. So, I hope this explains why I welcomed you with the hope that you'll visit here with me several times a week. Don't just come once every couple of weeks or once a month to see the new material. Come back, listen to it over and over again, practice the exercises, and enjoy the exquisite pleasure, the ecstasy of change. And I especially look forward to seeing your face at one of our upcoming question and answer sessions. So tune in and say hello. Tell me that you're new, and I'll welcome you. Welcome to the Inner Circle.